locking mechanisms back on here. They're all cleaned up and lubed up with some grease. Got that done today. That was the non-motor side. This is the motor side. That's where the motor goes. There's the release handle. So, yeah. It's all good so far. Now it's time to kind of position the columns where I think they're going to go, and start measuring stuff out to be able to start drilling holes in the floor. All right, we got more. We'll bring you back. Okay, guys. So, kind of at the end of another day. You can see the carriage is up. I lifted it up once just to make sure the locks worked the way they were supposed to. The big news is I got the column extensions on, I've got the cross member on, everything's stood up and in place. The columns are leveled. I've got kind of just a little bit of just temporary shims in there just to kind of level them up before I go through and do the drilling. So yeah, that's kind of a big deal. I'm very excited. It's see, we got about, we're centered on the entrance to the shop, and I wanted to push it as far that way as possible to have as much room as possible up front to do work, store another car, whatever. So that was my thinking. You can see the door and the light and everything. I've made sure all that clears with my truck, which is the biggest thing I own. When it would be up in its tallest position, kind of see the back of the cab will fit kind of just right up in there. Again, it doesn't go up to the light, it stops. There's a safety switch on there that'll stop it short of all that stuff, so it's not going to get in the way of that. So I think I got roughly 13 and a half, 14 feet between the wall and here. So enough to pull the truck in and any other car in and put it up in the air. So yeah, kind of excited. It's a big day. So next on the list is to drill the holes. Then it's all permanent. Only interesting thing that I'm gonna have to do, and I've talked to the owner. You can see. So you see right there. That's where the guy who owned it before, he rented this shop before me. He had this same type of lift. That's one of the reasons that I kind of shifted mine a little bit more towards the door to get away from his old bolt patterns. But interesting enough, when you put the lift up at its highest setting, it will, the hydraulic cylinder actually points out, excuse me, out the top of the column, and will actually just slightly get into that drywall. I checked and made sure there's no studs above it or anything. Excuse me. Like I said, it was in the attic, so I've got all the stuff in my nose, sneezing. So I'm gonna have to kind of remount a little bit of a hole where the cylinder will just pop it slightly, and when I eventually move out, I'll have to fill it just like he did. So it's kind of interesting. But it is perfect for the shop. There's probably 3.5, 4 inches over the top of it, clearance. So it fits the shop perfectly. So yeah, it's kind of a big day. I'm very, very happy. Everything's going together the way I expected it. Talk to you later. We'll bring you back when we got something else. Okay guys, so we're another day back at the shop in the process of drilling holes. I got the lift positioned where I want. The columns are trued up. Got them even to the front wall here and over there, and then kind of, I mean, it's not exactly dead on perfect because of course the walls aren't straight. That may not be particularly straight, but it's pretty dang close, and everything's all trued up, ready to go. I'm in the process of drilling holes. I'm just kind of taking my time because I don't want to overheat. This is a friend's drill, hammer drill, so I don't want to overheat the bit or the drill. You can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 drilled already. So yeah, we're gonna put drill all the holes for this side. There's 7 this side, 7 that side, and then we'll put in the anchors. These are the red heads that I'm using. They're 5.5 inch by 3/4. And what I've done is I kind of just tested the depth here. I was worried that the concrete wasn't going to be long enough, because again, this is a rented shop. It wasn't going to be deep enough. So if you look, be careful not to drop it in there, but that's the depth essentially, and it does go through. So you can see it's actually just about perfect, and it hasn't dropped through yet. It'll be just perfect to put a nut nutter on there, and a washer. So yeah, it's coming along. Should have the bolts done and installed today. We'll start on cables and pulleys and cylinders and all that fun stuff probably just after lunch. All right, we'll bring you back. All right, guys, so got the holes drilled. Bolts are in. You can see I just stuck them in the holes for there. I was working on this column, and what I did is I got this column all shimmed up and square. You can see kind of the shims around here. Nothing on this side. Started with that edge and then worked it from there. One thing when you're putting these bolts, smacking these bolts down, run the nut just below the bolt. That way when you're hitting it, if you do happen to quote mushroom the end of the bolt, your nut's already on. If you do this and are hitting the bolt, you can screw up the threads. A friend of mine told me about this because he did it. He backed it off just slightly. It was above the head of the bolt. He was hitting the nut, screwed up the threads, and had a heck of a time getting it fixed once he ran it, tried to run it down. So run it just below the head of the bolt, and then smack the bolt in. Yeah, so the first one's bolted in and good, and we're gonna move on to the second one. All right, we'll bring you back. Okay, guys, we're done. Kind of, as always. Lines are run, reservoir's filled, it goes up and down, arms are on. The only issue is, look at that bolt on both sides, how much thread pops out. It gets in the way of this arm. So that arm only goes there, where it's supposed to come basically all the way over parallel to that, so you can drive the car through. So I'm gonna have to get a sawzall, cut that on both sides. That's not a big deal. So yeah, I'm gonna do that. Then yeah, we're gonna put my wife's truck up on the list, but I can't drive it in between right now because the arms can't open wide enough. Only issue that I have, it goes up and down just fine, I run it all the way up, is this locking pin. So what happens is, when you see how they're kind of raised, when the carriage lifts up off, they go down and lock the arms. So you see how you can move the arm right now. There's some teeth back there. Well, that one is going down and locking rather rough. And then when the whole carriage goes back down, it is not quite popping back up all the way. It's just a little sticky, so I'm gonna have to mess with that a little bit. I didn't look closely at the teeth when I was putting it back together. I just did a cursory look at all of them, and they all looked okay. Of course, there's some wear and tear and stuff, obviously, but something's binding up. So yeah, but it goes up and down pretty dang well. Yep. All right, well, might as well just do the demo a little bit. Here we go. And you can hear the locks. That's the first time. That's almost dead on. So release the pressure, and then it's it's now sitting on the locks. Yeah, so yeah, it's pretty happy. All right, we'll bring you back. All right, guys, we're kind of done. Still having issues with those locking pins, locking when the arms go up. Need to start kind of messing with those, but you can see I got it's up off the ground. And it's pretty steady. It rocks a little bit, but I got some safety stands for it when it's up. As you can see, it kind of does move a little bit more than I like. But yeah, it's in, it works. I can get things to go up and down. It's all good. Have to move the door out of the way for this truck, at least when I go all the way up. But I can get it all the way up and I can walk underneath it without bending over. You can see that little hole right there. The cylinder just pokes into the hole when you go all the way up. So it just fits in here. Yeah, all right, so we'll bring you back. Okay guys, so as you know in the last video, I had all this installed. I've been using it for a couple weeks, maybe even a couple, like 6, 7, 8 weeks. Did a friend's Corvette on here. We had it up in the air for almost a month, so maybe it's been longer than that. But something I've been noticing is that this side, this is the left side, is not quite working the same as the right side. And I don't know if you remember back in the other videos when I replaced all this stuff, the ride pads and all that kind of stuff in there, I noticed that these were actually gone. It was actually metal on metal. And what that has produced, or what I'm noticing now, is when I move the carriage up to the first lock position and then start to set it back down on top of that lock to hold it, that side will stay in place and this side sags. And what I've noticed is a lot of times you'll get those holes will get oblong and you'll get lift sag, which you can't really tell, I'm lifting up on it. There's a little bit of play, but not much. But here's what happens when you lift the entire thing. I don't know if you can see it. The actual carriage completely moves. And if you look way back in there, you can see there's a gap on the back side between the wear surface and the wear pad. So what's happening is that entire thing is tilted like that as it's lifting. And what it's doing is, that is the bracket where all the lock slots are on the back side of it. It's tilting it out at the back portion right at the top to where the lock won't catch. Whereas this one, if I do that same thing and lift up down here, you can see I get the same kind of little bit of play. But if I lift up hard, I can't move the actual carriage. It doesn't play at all inside there. It's really, really tight. Whereas that one's, there's some play. So what I'm gonna try and do is I've got some spare metal, and I think that's about an 8 thick, which I think is approximately the amount of play in there. So I'm gonna try and put it on this side between the metal and the white piece. Of course, I'll get that grease out of there. Slide it down in there, and hopefully it takes that play out. And if I need to, I can put one on the bottom as well to kind of give you a top front top front ride pad and then a bottom rear. Make those ride pads contact with the surface that they need to be in contact with while trying to kind of get it more upright as it slides. So that's what we're going to try and do. We'll see if it works or not.